coffee. She's a good girl.
We're live.
Great.
All right.
So as we, what we were telling you about a little earlier is we've been setting up conversations with some of our longer time members as part of the History and Artifacts Committee, which we sort of revitalized over the last few months. And we just want to get these conversations on tape to help people get a real understanding of this club and the legacy of the club. You know, what happens is when people die and you've got to forensically do it, it's just not quite as effective as being able to have people tell their story firsthand. So there are no right or wrong answers to this one. Everyone has a different story to tell, and we're looking forward. This is our biggest group that we've had, but we're looking forward to hearing the rich history of your family. So why don't we start by how did your family, or when did your family get involved with the club?
Well, my dad was a Sea Scout in San Francisco as a teen, and the ship that they were on was called Flying Cloud, and they used to sail over here from San Francisco to get milkshakes in Tiburon. They'd sail out of the fog and into the sunshine, and Dad at one point in time decided this is where he wanted to live. So they ended up buying a house up on Belvedere Island, a very small house. My sister and my mom and dad lived up there, and Dad looked down here, and he'd been a sailor all of his life, and he had a bird boat, number 8, the Petrel, that used to be anchored out here before the harbor was here. Then he sold the Petrel and bought an International 210, the Southwester, sailed that out of here, and that would have been in the 40s and the 50s. Then he bought the Top Banana from Bob Bernheim, another International 210, and that would have been in the 50s. And then in '63, he bought the Skylark, bird boat number 6. He sold number 8 because it was getting too old, and then 20, 30 years later bought an even older one.
Old Wilkins.
And that was all done long before the harbor was in, when this used to be the bar, and the bar used to be the dining room, and the sun porch was not glassed in, and behind the bar was the men's locker room. These Corinthian pillars had seat all around, seat cushions on them. The bars, I remember, had kind of greenish tile with seagulls on it. Seagulls on it,
yeah.
and that was right along here.
And the Bruno was
Yeah.
anchored out there.
Jim
Big,
Michaels
big
has
boat, yeah.
had a 73-foot catch, or yawl, I guess it was a yawl, that used to be anchored out here, big black beauty. And you wanted to get, the mooring grounds were all out here, and there was an old guy named Ed. I don't know what Ed's last name was, but he was the shoreboat driver. And the club had like an old Navy gig boat, and if you want, he would take you out to your boat with all your sails on it, and offload onto your boat, and pull your sails up, and cast loose, and sail off, and then come back, pick up the buoy, and Ed would come out and get you and your crew and bring you back into the club.
And the harbor was totally open. There was no
There
semblance
was
of
a
any.
There was a T dock that went out, I want to say halfway between A line and B line. It was an elevated dock that went out, and it had either 2 ramps going down on each side or 3 ramps going down to floating docks. And so if you wanted to come in, basically you had to do a U-turn, sail upwind into the weather-facing march, and I guess the power boats would use the downwind ones to get in. So there was like 6 slips, that was it. 6 or 8 slips.
And a hoist.
There was 2 hoists.
Yeah.
There was a small hoist right at the end of Pneumonia Alley, and then there was the bird boat hoist right about where B and C dock goes down. And this was a big driven pile structure where you'd bring your boat in, and I'm not sure whether it was mechanical or hydraulic, somehow lifted the boat out of the water, and you could walk all around the boat, paint the bottom, clean it up. And that was, as I said, about where BC line is. And it had to be in the 70s, I think, that the little current little hoist that we had right here off of Pneumonia Alley, the tree guy, Frank Brooks had a Santana 22, and he was either putting the boat in the water or hauling it out of the water, and the whole darn thing just collapsed, and they never rebuilt it.
That was
I remember that one.
Yeah.
But they used to hang all the wet sails up in the ballroom in those days.
Right.
And that's how they
Right.
dried them out.
That's what all those pulleys are up in
Yeah.
the ceiling.
Up in the ceiling.
And that was
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah, because the sails were cotton back then. And they
What,
had-
what age did your father start indoctrinating his kids into the?
Well, we grew up on the lagoon in Belvedere, and at 5 years old, we were all introduced, 5, 6, 7, 8, in an El Toro shoved away from the dock and said, find your way back. And when he bought the Top Banana, which would have been before we went to Tennessee, it would have been in the 50s.
Yeah, it was before.
In the 50s, his idea was that his two oldest kids, Donna and myself, would be his crew, and then he'd have one, Charlie Pruitt, somebody, an older gentleman that would help with the spinnaker pole jumping. And we were all going to go out and race in the bay, and that ended up being a pipe dream.
Well, we went out the very first day, and it was storming that day, and Dad was nuts for us to go out, because this is just a big canoe is what it
That's
is.
right.
Oh, man.
Have you seen, you know what a 110 is? A 210 is the 30-foot version of it. It's a,
Oh, okay.
a 3/8-inch plywood open cockpit boat with
I remember it
styrofoam
well.
pump, styrofoam boards stuffed in the bow and stuffed in the stern because they'd swamp and they wouldn't sink with all the
Remember
styrofoam
when
in
we
them.
were
Well, did your mother have any say in this?
Yes, there's a famous saying around the dinner table. My mother, it was opening day, she got in the 210 and they went out sailing, and she came back and she got to the dock, she said, Russ, it might be opening day for you, but it's closing day for me, and she never set foot in the 210
Well,
again.
she didn't swim, and so it was,
Oh.
Well, yeah, the
so
two
that
ten
was always something.
So there was that fear.
Scared her.
But
Constant
did
fear.
she sail later on, or was that mainly Dad and the three of you that?
Well, didn't they used to
No,
go?
when we got the bird boat, we went through the same exercise, but
But they
this
went
time
to the Delta.
Chris was involved,
Oh, okay.
this time.
But it was the same
But your dad
exercise.
took the Skylark to the Delta, didn't he, with your mom?
No, that was the Petrel.
That was the
Oh,
petrol.
petrol, whatever, it was a
Yeah,
bird boat.
the first boat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
in
long-
'63,
that was
he
a
bought
long journey,
the
wasn't it?
Skylark, and
Oh,
then he
bird
had
boat.
with Chris and
Think
I,
about when-
and a guy
I
named
mean,
John
it takes you all
Franklin, who
day
was like the muscle
to
guy
get up
that
there.
could
They went
muscle
to
spinnaker
Steamboat
pole
Sloop.
around.
Okay.
Oh,
And
my goodness.
we basically handed out
One
cups
head?
of, we were movable ballast down below.
But did you, the three of you, I mean, you said that your dad kind of said, okay, here's the boat, you get in and then goodbye and you find your way
Well, that's what he
back.
did when we were little in El
Yeah.
Toros.
Did any of you ever feel like you were pressured to be
We
sailors?
were pressured
or-
if we didn't win.
Therefore, they win.
Were there any other kids around?
Oh,
Or-
we used to sail to our friends' homes on
the
the
lagoon.
Belvedere
Oh,
Lagoon.
okay.
Instead of riding bikes or whatever have you, we would just sail to each other's
A
houses.
lot of the people on the lagoon ended up joining the San Francisco Yacht Club, and so there was a junior sailing program over there, and we didn't have one here.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
sailed in the lagoon most of the time when we were kids.
It was like that old thing you see on cars, my second car is a boat.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we used to do really dumb things like the Allen family. I don't know if you know, have you met Kent?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yes,
Kent and
we
I
did.
grew up together, and
He rejoined.
His
Here?
uncle,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Ken-
sponsor him.
Yeah.
Kent's uncle David Allen was the one who put Improbable and Imp together. Those, I don't know if you read Scuttlebutt, but they just had a big thing on Imp, which was a revolutionary boat. But at any rate, David lived on the lagoon, and he had a sunfish, and I had a sailfish. And I don't know if you know the difference. A sunfish has a cockpit, and
Oh.
a sailfish doesn't. A sailfish has two wooden rails down the side, and we used to
Almost like sitting on a surfboard.
sitting on a sailing surfboard, and we used to take. They had the same rigs, same size sail area. We'd sail down to the beach road, carry the boats across, put them in the bay, and then go out sailing with no life jackets, no safety gear at all. And we'd sail out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge in these things,
Oh my.
doing that really dumb stuff back then.
my.
So how was it being in the club as youngsters? I mean, you were basically.
I was
involved
with
the
Dad all the
sailing.
time.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was just his oldest daughter, and he always took me everywhere. So even the club was all no women, but I was always with him, so I got to hear all the gossip and all the things that women weren't supposed to know, and I had to keep my mouth shut. But it was,
So were there literally no women?
pardon?
There was literally
Absolutely no women. They couldn't even use the bathrooms or anything. It was really
That was,
restricted.
when was that? That was year what?
I would say that was in the 50s,
In the
early
50s,
50s.
yeah.
Because I was born in 45, and I was 6 or 7 or 8 at that time. So,
So you were
but
just-
that no women
Yeah, if you look
lasted
at it-
even when I was with my children. It was very difficult for women to even come up onto the deck.
They were, Karen, Donna, was it Chris? Were the first women to ever barge into an
And,
annual meeting. There were no women allowed, and they walked
Patrick
in.
was with us.
Marilyn?
Yeah,
Marilyn
Marilyn
Patrick.
Patrick was with us as well.
And somebody stood
You
up
weren't
and
there?
said, that no women allowed, and
You would remember this.
I should remember.
Because Hal
that.
Monazon was just, oh,
Yeah.
he was fit
So
to
this
be
was-
tried.
So were they evicted?
No.
no?
No,
They sat,
he
they
was
sat in
Try
the,
doing that to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying, because we came in 69.
Scrappy little
so,
things.
So,
Yeah, Hal Monazon and
He was so angry.
Bertisevich.
yeah, George Bertisevich and Marin Matasich.
Yeah.
You remember all those
I
good old boys?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Yeah, this was strictly a men's weekend club. It was not open during the week,
Right, just the weekend, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
not even Friday.
Not even Friday?
That's why I want to talk about the Friday night race thing. I
Right,
have
yeah,
a
let's,
vested interest in that.
yeah, let's
please go
talk
into-
about that.
Okay, well, our company had an office down behind the post office here in town. And on Friday, after work, it was not unusual to walk down to Tiburon Tommy's, have a final, work into the work week drink. And there was a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Benson, who was a member here. Lloyd had a souling and a wife named Jackie. And I had a bird boat and a girlfriend named Karen. And we were at Fridays, we'd sit out there, and one day Lloyd says, why don't we see if we can get a Friday night race started for the club, get the club to open, on Fridays. And so we ended up doing that. We would take the bird boat, Karen and I would take the bird boat, Lloyd and Jackie would take the souling and sail out around Alcatraz and come back again. I'm trying to remember, we did it maybe 3 Fridays in a row. And then we got Donna and her husband, Dick Cardoza. They had a Cal 29, right? Cal 29?
Well, we started with the Ranger 26.
Ranger 26.
Yeah.
We got them to come out. And then Bill Patry with his Cal 29 came out. So there was like 4 of us doing this. And we talked somebody into getting the shotgun out, at least giving us a start. And it got so popular that the club started opening on Friday nights, the bar.
And it became more formal, setting marks
So there,
and all
you're
that.
welcome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Do you know, were you aware if any other clubs were doing these so-called beer can races?
The St. Francis Yacht Club, or was it Golden Gate?
Golden Gate.
The Golden Gate Yacht Club had a Friday night series. And it's a long ways to sail from here to there with a
Right.
boat with no motor. So,
Right.
so we ended up getting it started here. It was really Lloyd Benson's idea.
and that was year.
Well, I'm going to say 65.
No, I was going to
No.
say 70s. Cause
No, because 70s I wasn't here.
Honey,
It was
I met you after I was in high school. I graduated
no,
in
no,
69.
excuse me. It'd be in the 70s.
Yeah,
I think
the
it would be in the
70s,
early
yeah.
70s.
Early 70s.
Don't add years to
And what about in the chronology of things? When did the midwinters start? Was that after these Friday
Oh,
night-
yes, quite a bit after. I think they used to do 4, and then they condensed it to two days. Yeah, they used to do 4 events, and I'm not really sure when that started. Probably in the 80s, I would guess. What do you think, Yuta?
I can't remember. I just remember that there were so many races going on the bay that I'm sure you did and we
Yeah,
did
they had the Berkeley series.
partaken, and
Yeah.
so I can't really remember our own midwinter
Yeah.
when
We didn't-
that started.
We didn't participate in the midwinters because the Skylark didn't have an engine. And the winds are so fickle in the
Right.
in the wintertime, so we didn't participate.
What about when you started doing those Friday night races? Did that attract sailors from other clubs, or
Oh,
was this
yeah, they started coming from next door, what I call Brand XYC.
Yeah.
How was that relationship? Was that always a decent relationship?
Oh,
with
it
the
was,
other-
yeah, they had to be,
It's all in
there,
fun.
there used to be a sandbar that went from that channel marker all the way to Belvedere Point, and you couldn't go straight out. You had to come along the front of the club, so we were always, waving at the people from the other club.
Oh, they're very competitive clubs.
Right.
And always have been,
Right,
so.
right. But you knew, in some instances, your neighbors, anyway, besides.
Oh, and we all
most
know
of
it, and we all
Yeah.
You all
knew
knew
each
each
other.
other.
I mean, I grew up with a lot of the members that are over there, because
Right.
we all went to the same high school and
Right.
whatever,
Grammar schools.
or grammar school.
Yeah,
even. But it just, one belonged to Corinthian and one belonged to San Francisco, and we always thought ours was better than theirs, and so,
Ours was prettier than theirs.
yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Always has been, always will be.
I was gonna say, nothing changes really there.
No.
So competitive spirits, so here's the whole family were out racing, and you were competing during the years against each other and.
The one year
against
when we all
Dad
had Islanders together, we
Oh, yeah.
competed.
We had
You
3
competed
Islanders in the
against
family.
Dad
Yeah.
also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember racing against Dad anywhere but in the lagoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the first time I beat him, I was very proud. It was a 3 or 4 race regatta, and I ended up beating my father, which was, he was
was a big
he was
deal.
one of the better sailors on the lagoon, and so I was proud of myself. I still have the big pickle dish, if you will.
And he probably wasn't very happy about it.
Well, his ego didn't get in his way too much.
I remember racing with the girls. I've seen this one.
Yes, very
And I remember coming back in, I remember your mom and dad, always had to have dinner afterwards and sort of gather
Well,
up the crew.
Dad's
and,
philosophy was there's 10 YRA races and he wanted a steady crew. If you don't have the same people doing the same job every time, there's mix-ups. So he bought all of his crew foul weather gear, bought them all dinner after the race.
He set
and-
a really rough precedent.
And he said the idea was that when
He's right.
when the husband
Oh, yeah,
woke
he
up
is.
and said, "Oh God, I got to
Absolutely.
go out sailing today," and he said, "I wanted the wives to throw him out of the house and say, 'Now get down there, and I'll meet you for dinner on Russ,'"
Worked every time.
and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I remember us, I remember the support of both mom and dad.
Well, Dad was
Oh, yeah.
very
The girls.
family
yes.
oriented. That's one of the reasons he got the bird boat, the
This guy,
Skylark, because we were all in high school at that time, and he saw us diverting from sailing and going off with boyfriends
Hot
and
rods
girlfriends, and he thought, I better get them all back in again. So he bought the bird boat, which put us back every weekend together again, and that kind of kept the family that way.
and so there's a model upstairs of the bird boat, the Skylark.
Oh, there is.
It's up in the upstairs bar. It's in a plastic case. Her father carved that out of a solid chunk of redwood. That's not a hollow model. And then in the trophy case, there's the Schneider Perpetual, which is also
Right.
bird boat number 6 Skylark
Wow.
that we donated to the club for that event.
Now, were you involved in sailing before you guys got together, or
Never. Horses.
horses? Okay. What about? We know at that time largely, certainly your involvement was much more around racing, and then you had sailors who didn't necessarily race. What about the social side of the club? And
I
bar.
remember as kids,
Oh, yeah.
Santa used to come at Christmas time. He'd come around Belvedere Point in a power boat, all dressed up, and he'd dock here, and he'd sit in what was the dining room at the time, it's now the bar, and give out presents. But there wasn't a lot of kids here, as I recall.
You know,
There was
we had the Women's Auxiliary, which was at that time was called the Women's Auxiliary, and our purpose was to raise money for deck furniture and niceties in the club that wouldn't have normally been purchased. And so we had a lot of functions on that to raise money. We had a gambling night that one.
Casino night, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
'cause-
was fun.
Yeah, we had a casino night, and we had other events that the women sponsored, the eggnog, but that wasn't a fundraiser. That was just a social thing.
Every Memorial Day in the 80s, 70s and 80s, we'd do a long distance cruise from here to Hospital Cove. And one year we had 22 boats
Yeah.
rafted up. Somebody would go over like on Wednesday
Couple of
before it
boats
got crowded,
Couple of boats.
get 2 buoys, and then everybody would come over on the weekends. And one time we were hiked up to the top and went down, counted 22 boats anchored side by side. And that's where the Corinthian Order of Night Swimmers became, the acronym is COONS, C-O-O-N-S, Corinthian Order of Night Swimmers.
Was it Daryl who went in first?
I don't remember, but there was
Somebody
no
always
lack
went
of
in.
alcohol
No,
involved.
there's no lack of anything
And you were
involved.
visiting somebody's boat that's 10 boats away from yours, and so you got to
It was-
go across,
Tough.
and not everybody made
Made
it
it.
and stayed dry.
And once you got there, if you got in between it, we went, my late husband and I went over with 2 of Michael, I think, my youngest one, he was still in diapers. And we were only going over there for the day.
And they got
And
trapped.
we got rafted in and couldn't get out. And everybody's throwing paper towels for diapers, and they were trying to accommodate us so we didn't have to
We'd
go
bring
home.
cats and dogs.
Yeah, we had
Kids
dogs.
would play in the
We
sand and
played
then go get in your bed.
Backgammon tournaments.
Somebody else's
Everybody
fever,
had
they'd
to go
crawl
around.
in. God.
Yeah.
But then
Cats staring at
we
them.
also had the Corinthian Games.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that goes,
Remember that?
the
That
Corinthian
goes-
Games go way back.
That
Yeah.
goes way back.
Yeah, because they used to do it at California City. There used to be a
A baseball game.
baseball diamond over
Yeah.
there, and there was the Marlin Spikes versus, it was the motorboaters versus the
Probably the
sailboaters.
sailboaters,
They had
yeah.
a baseball, and somewhere around here, there's a trophy, a plaque that has a Marlin Spike, and I don't know what did this say? Maybe a winch handle or something crossed, and which team won the annual baseball
It was a
game?
fun place.
That had to be back in the 40s, in the 50s.
Oh, but I remember some, while
Well, yeah,
while
well,
we have been.
Yes.
Oh, but they did them
But they were
over,
over by the Paradise.
yeah, Paradise Park,
Park.
yeah. Well, that's where
Yeah.
California City was, over there
Yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah.
and then opening day, because that has changed certainly.
Yeah, but as I
during
recall,
the
wasn't it
years.
Charlie, I think Charlie White was the one who actually started the whole
Yeah.
opening day on the bay. It's all started right out of here.
Out of here.
Out of
really.
here.
Out of here, yeah.
Charlie
Out of
White
here.
was a big driver of that. There used to be somebody knew, was it Charlie, probably knew somebody in the Navy, and they'd bring a big ship, and they'd anchor it out in the cove. And they'd have a rabbi and a priest and a minister, and they'd do the annual blessing of the fleet.
Yeah,
Now,
they-
you get a Coast Guard cutter now, I guess,
Right,
if anything. But
right.
they used to anchor big ships out there.
And take people out to
Oh, yeah,
go
you
on
could,
and
Yeah,
from
go
here,
out
you
to
could
it.
get out and take a tour of the
tour
ship.
the ships.
Well, now we have a private. Now it's a private boat.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a lot smaller
I mean, it
boats,
is
too.
more like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, when I describe it to people and talk about a priest, a rabbi, and a minister, it sounds like you're
A
starting
joke.
to tell
Sounds like
a
a
joke.
joke, yeah. They all walked into a bar, right?
Right.
But I mean, the party is around opening day.
Oh, and the
Oh,
water
Lord.
balloons and the
Oh,
and the
Lord.
nude women coming through the harbor. And,
Oh, yeah, there was a guy
Yeah.
that had a big powerboat that used to come in. He had a band on board.
Was that the big red power? Not.
No, not the cigarette boat. This
Not
was
the
like,
cigarette
this was a
boat.
a cabin cruiser, a big cabin cruiser, and he had a full band, like a Dixieland band, and he had topless women, and they'd come in around Tiburon Tommy's and, and Sam's, and
Good old days.
those were the good old days.
Yeah.
But then opening day got really, I think my
Yeah.
daughter was an infant in our arms, and we were out, I think we were motoring out,
Yeah, we were in
and
SEMA.
we didn't even see this boat come up behind us, this power boat came out, and they just
nailed me
blasted us with water
with
balloons.
water balloons.
And there, I'm holding my
no.
daughter, and she
Oh,
gets
what?
hit right in the head with a water
Yes.
balloon. I was so mad.
Too much.
Oh, God, was
Too
I
much.
mad.
Yeah, and then you'd see them with their John Berry How to Sail.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So, being members as long as you've been, were you aware at certain times, because, we've certainly heard stories, and all clubs go through this, where they go through some financial straits and it impacts maybe the membership and all of that. Were you aware of those times when they would occur, and did it impact the membership?
I remember when people came down here because the food was good, and I remember when people didn't come down here because the food wasn't good. And I didn't know too much. Well, when Bill Canada was Commodore, I know they tried to raise the dues $5 a month, and there was almost a fist fight over the $5 a month. And there were people who were adamantly against that. Evan Pugh, $5. Oh, I don't remember any really financial bad times. I was young. If they were happening, I wasn't aware of them.
I'm looking forward to when we talk with Bill, because I believe under his watch, he was pretty responsible for the redecoration of this
dining room.
which evidently had previously looked sort of like a bordello.
Was it red? Kind of
Yeah,
dark
sort
red
of. But then
paint?
I don't
he had
even
some
remember
issues
it.
with the chairs. There's somebody that didn't like the chairs, and he had.
Oh, they
problems
sold,
with
I
that.
remember they sold
Yeah, you had
the
your
chairs.
names on 'em.
You'd have your name on a plaque on the back of the chair because you bought a chair for the dining room.
But I had a lot
we
of
still have
friends
that.
that wanted to
I was gonna say,
join
when
the
did
club, but the parking lot was always the issue. That was always
and the
the
bird.
issue.
In what regard?
Pardon?
No,
Wait,
it's
what?
so small.
It's
It's
small
too small.
and,
You know, you come down on a Saturday afternoon, you can't find a place to park.
and you can't, it costs you too much to park across the street, and you can't park on the road, and so it just seemed to be an issue. And I always thought Tiburon had such a big mistake by not allowing people to park on the roadside. I mean, it's
Streets
just-
aren't big enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's terrible. It's very unfriendly that way.
Hmm.
So, and that happened to be with the club, that they would say, well, San Francisco Yacht Club has such a large parking lot that it just
Right.
Was
seemed to make
easier.
more sense to go over there.
But to
so.
see that beautiful jewel box sparkle in the night, you gotta look through all those sticky things that are in their harbor.
Right.
Those things that stick up and block the view.
And they bang around.
I mean, that was a talk here at some point, many years ago, was, could extend the harbor and have boats out here, and, it was just a talk.
That was
People
Peter
were
Hogg.
They were already like, oh, no,
That
we
was,
can't watch
that was Peter
drumsticks.
Hogg. It was Bill's Commodore ship. I was on the committee of club members. It was myself, Greg Quilici, and Ron Kell. And then there were 3 people that represented people that owned stock in the harbor company. To get a slip in the harbor company, you didn't own a slip. You owned stock in the harbor corporation, which gave you the opportunity to have. So they had to get that back into the club. And we were following the same format San Francisco Yacht Club did and a lot of other ones. And we were like 3/4 of the way getting ready to sign the deal. And it was November, regime change. And Peter Hogg says, scrap the whole thing, throw it away, because we're going to build a breakwater all the way out. And,
All the way up.
Fill the whole cove with Corinthian Yacht Club boats. And everybody's scratching their heads saying, oh boy, try to get the permits from the BCDC to do that these days.
Right.
And so it never happened, of course, and so then they had to start all over again with another group to get the harbor back into the club proper.
So I know you were pretty active in the Tahoe Yacht Club.
I was Commodore.
Commodore,
In
and
2004, and my husband was Commodore in 2012.
and your sister now is Commodore here. Did you have any aspirations to?
Oh, John Culver used to call me every time, asked me to go up to board. Back then, the club didn't have a manager. The club was open on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, and the Commodore was the club manager. And I already had a full-time job. And my father set a very good example for me anyway. He never went up the flag either. I sat on 2 of John's boards. I sat on Diana Fisher's board, a couple of other people. But anyway, so I did my community service as a board member. But I didn't want to come down here on a weekend and have to go to work and settle petty disputes between members, or fire some waitress who wasn't performing in the dining room. And
Wake up
so
over there.
I had no aspirations, but it's changed now. It's changed now that there's a club manager, and but I still don't have any aspirations to do that.
To your knowledge, at any time did we have members volunteer? We always had hired employees, correct?
As I said, there was Ed, the shoreboat driver. I'm sure he was
Malazan
employed.
was port captain, and that was not a hired position, so that was a
Right.
volunteer position.
Yeah,
It
and that's
was
what
mostly
Greg.
volunteer.
That's what Greg does
That's
now
the
too.
same.
Yeah,
today.
same today.
That's what
And
happened.
somehow there must have been employees that worked the dining room on the weekends when that club was only open
Yeah.
on the weekends.
Yeah.
I think I remember all the years we have been here too. There has been somebody in the front office that was, working the front office.
Yeah,
But that
Francis.
wasn't-
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, but that's when the club was open 7 days a week or 6 days a week. Not just
But
not
anyway.
just Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah,
But
but the
anyway,
women auxiliary, or the women, whatever they call them now, did all the clothes and sold all of the clothing and those types of things.
Yeah,
So
I was
yeah, so that was a volunteer.
instigating that.
You're right.
That hold,
Right.
but
It's
that
all your
was
fault.
under the, it's all my fault. That was under the women's auxiliary that we sort of, we did that and,
and those beautiful
That's still-
deck chairs were all you're doing, were they not?
that was
Yeah.
after. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it was after. But it was the same, the
Organization.
purpose was the same.
Yeah, to better
to raise
the
money
little
and
niceties
to-
in the
They
club,
did
yes.
the
Yeah.
rib spirit. I think
Right.
that was. Yeah.
But
yeah.
I remember times that was, I mean,
Excuse me,
that was
bless you.
just so
Thank
hard
you.
financially that even they would come and ask for some paint
Yeah.
from the Corinthian, from the women's auxiliary because the club really was.
Yeah, a fun
Poor.
exercise, I don't know if anybody has talked about it, when they found dry rot in the bottom of the flagpole. They had the jack, on a low tide underneath, they jacked it up, they cut 4 feet off of it and let it back
Bring it
down.
back down.
Has anybody talked about that before?
No.
No.
Oh, yeah, that,
Please
they
do.
found rot at the base of the flagpole. And,
Did they
Monty
get a
Roll-
rabbi to do that?
Pardon? Yeah, Monty Rollins used to go up to that to paint it in a bosun's chair.
I remember that.
Oh my.
Oh, I don't think I'd want to do that.
No.
I think there's probably dry rot at the top where that shiv is up there also.
Yeah, it's we're still going through the demo here, I think, and they're every once in a while I think they come across a surprise. I haven't heard of any bones or anything.
There's
Well,
ghosts.
for the
John was
ghost-
just
for the
telling us
ghost.
that they were afraid some beam was rotting under the upstairs kitchen, upstairs galley.
Yeah.
And they pulled out the floor and found there wasn't any beam there to
There was
rot.
to rot.
It was,
It was,
No
the floor
problem.
was a little saggy, and it wasn't because of a bad beam.
It's
It was a
probably,
no beam.
it's probably amazing when we think back.
Oh.
Well, Chris said in this construction that they're finding all kinds of
All kinds of
interesting
fun
things,
stuff.
so.
Yeah, has anybody talked about the upstairs ghost?
Sometime a little bit,
yeah,
but why
a
don't you
little bit about-
talk about that?
A good friend of ours, Daryl Snell, who lived on his boat here in the harbor. But before that, he worked for the harbor company, and he lived upstairs in the ballroom, in a little room off the stage. And he swears to this day that when he was up there late at night, he could hear chains dragging, footsteps, doors slamming. I've heard stories about people in the women's room up there with pictures flying off the walls.
Yeah, and the doors
And
flapping.
the doors
Flapping.
slapping back and forth.
Yeah.
I can confirm.
Yeah, yeah. You've had to go up there?
I've heard things. I haven't seen anything, but I've heard from like past employees that they've seen like little dancing balls of light when there's like nothing
Yeah.
on up by the
So,
stage and stuff.
The
like
place
that.
is, the place is
So-
bugged.
It's still,
Wow.
yeah, and phones, all of a sudden
Yeah,
there was
and
phones,
there's a rumor that a ghost stopped the building from being burned down, that there was something in the kitchen up in the ballroom. Somebody had either left the
Burner on or
burner
something?
on or something, and it started a fire. And something, they say, they could only explain that it had to be the ghost that put it out. Because
it's a good ghost.
Yeah, it was a good
The
ghost.
good ghost is our protective ghost.
Yes,
Yes.
protected ghost.
I know you're not here all year round, but what changes have you seen in the club that strike you as being different? You know, we talk about the legacy and the history, but obviously, you know, things change and all of that, and what we're trying to do is just make sure that the new group coming in just really understands just how much texture there is to this club.
Well, I think we already talked about what the club was like beforehand.
Mhm.
When I say beforehand, I mean in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. The first breakwater they put in was smaller than this one, I mean, as far as area, and it was driven like creosoted pile. And over the years, that thing, particularly with the southerly winter storms, took a real beating, and it used to work and creak, and then a board or a pile would wash out, and then the water would come through, and so then they had to pull that out, and that was a real project to watch them do that. They get a big clam, like a dredging clam, and they'd clamp onto a piling, and they'd winch the barge over by taking up on the block and tackle, if you will, and then they'd let the tackle go, and the barge would come rocking up, and then it would go rocking back down again, and when it got down, they'd close the clamshell on the pile, and then it would give it a jerk. And that's how they pulled all those piles out.
They use the weight of the barge.
They used the
basically,
weight, the centrifugal force, if you will, of the barge coming back up
Very interesting.
to yank the piles out. The ones, and then there's a lot of them that broke off, and they were concerned about, what are they going to do with the piles that are broken off under the water
Yeah.
line? But they got this one in, and it seems to be holding up a lot better than the old one. And it also allowed them to expand the harbor a little bit. There's more A-line docks, and then it gave us the interior of A-line between the bulkhead.
Well, that one year that we had a neap tide, and
Oh, yeah.
and all the docks went over.
It floated off, the docks floated off their end
over the
pilings.
piling, and
Oh,
the
no.
whole
And the whole harbor was,
harbor was floating down.
Oh, my.
with boats tied up to the finger piers, and the finger piers were floating around in the harbor. Because the tide had come up so high, they
Wow.
floated off the top of the end pilings.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun to put back together.
Yeah, oh.
Wasn't that too that it got so bad in the harbor that insurance companies were starting to say,
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
not want to insure boats in Corinth.
You, in the wintertime, with the old breakwater deteriorating, you went through a set of dock lines
And
and
a lot
spring
of wear,
lines
a lot
every year.
more wear and tear on the boats.
Every winter, you had to put on new.
And mast wood locks and.
Oh, yeah,
so
that
much
happened a few
surf,
times, too.
and That happened,
Spreaders locking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it
But
was-
you asked about the improvements of the club. Well, I think the club is just beautiful. Kalichi, when he painted the club so beautifully with the white paint and the gold and
Oh, I
the
was,
They did a
yeah,
really
that was
nice
during
job.
Culver's watch, I think, because I was on the board
yeah.
at the time, and there was such a fuss about,
Always
they wanted to put
fusses.
in the gray trim and the gold leaf, and people just wanted it white, just paint it, it's always been white, paint it white.
I remember Peter was port captain,
Mm-hmm.
and with Greg Polici, and they made the mistake of putting the rendering out for everybody to see.
Oh.
And then we went together with Culver's, and we were on a weekend trip, and we came back, and there had been a riot in the club.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone had their opinion.
So I
But
think now they have learned, they kind of just do a little changes and
Oh, I
not
know.
put
Yeah,
it
it was a
out
little
for
more
the-
subtle.
a little
And
more
the doors
subtle.
that John Culver put in, I mean, I know he did that because he had
The NARS were coming.
NARS were coming, and he wanted the club to look exquisite, and it did.
Right.
And it really did make a difference, but there was an uproar at the time, and who was paying for the doors and all kinds of
The
stuff.
owner of the yacht club.
The owner.
Well,
Yeah.
I think if anyone, questions this, just get on to Visit Arrow and come down the hill and, how far away is that? And you look straight across and you
Oh, it's very stately.
You
It's
can
a very stately
definitely
building.
see our club.
But then the membership changed too. In older years, I could say some of the members were a little rough, and
George Haggett.
yeah, George Haggett and
And a
George
few
Haggett.
others.
Yeah.
yeah, there's a
And
few
who was the
others.
other
And as the
old
membership
guy?
grew and
I mean, George Haggett.
No, not
The
George.
type of
the
people
other guy.
changed,
It tempered it a little bit.
tempered it a bit, and
Yeah.
it's
But there were stories about annual meetings where fistfights actually broke out upstairs.
Upstairs.
And that was maybe one of the reasons why women weren't allowed.
yeah.
Well, I mean, even after women were allowed, it was always.
Contentious.
It was.
Yes.
It really was.
Yeah.
But we were fighting with like 150 members at the time. There wasn't a lot of revenue being generated.
Right. So money issues tend to.
But they're in
do
all
that.
clubs.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So.
We have another iconic area here. I wonder if you have any stories tied to Pneumonia Alley.
I know how it got its name.
How's that?
It's cold down there. The wind whistles through
We
there.
didn't lose anyone though. Huh?
I
We didn't-
spent, no, I spent many a winter down there varnishing Skylark's mast. There used to be a spar bench that ran right down the middle of the alley,
Yeah.
which is basically 2x8s, 2x12, and then a flat surface, and it had wedges in it so your mast wouldn't roll off. Stripped and varnished, and there were days it was so windy and cold down there that I wouldn't varnish because the varnish wouldn't set up.
Right, just too cold.
It's always been cold, but that was before they sealed off the other end. It used to be open at this end, so the wind just blew through there.
Yeah, and the women in those days, the contentious days when the women couldn't come up here, that was our only bathroom. And it was
Boy,
terrible.
was that a gym.
So you were not allowed even after you
On the
were
upper
Couldn't
deck.
come upstairs. And I was pregnant and I got mad one time this came up anyway.
Anyway.
And I said, throw me out if you
Yeah.
want. And everybody, because I'm here at Big Belly.
Yeah.
And so
Little
that
fireball.
sort of broke the ice on some of it, that they had to be a little bit more
Yeah.
open or forgiving, on certain circumstances.
Someone who's
that-
been here all her life, it's hard to kick her out.
Exactly. What do you think? Is there anything that comes to mind talking about how things changed, where women became more acceptable, for lack of a better term, and around when would that have happened?
That was in the 70s. I was Women's Auxiliary President for 2 years with Marilyn Patry and in that group. And she was just as feisty, a group with Karen
yeah.
and you and me. And, so we kind of stirred the pot a lot. And that's when Hal Monazon we finally got them to
Simmer down.
simmer
sit
down a
and
little
be quiet.
bit. Yeah, and so it was about that time, and then that's when the women racing. So we were becoming an asset to the club
Yeah.
because they were getting publicity from that and those types of things. And I think that
No, that's
helped.
because I feel that the women, and I said that when Ross and I were doing this,
Right.
and what I felt was as much as it was a men's club, but when the women started to go out and race, we were really supported. I mean, I thought there was a huge support.
Yeah, they did. They'd go out and watch us and
Oh, yeah.
and follow us around, and it was.
They were very
it was
proud of
great.
us.
Yeah, it was good.
When that all started to emerge, was it still the situation where if you were a woman to join this club, you had to be attached to a man?
Well, when my late husband died, and that was
Oh,
Yeah.
that was in 19.
Sarah was,
70, no, that was.
no, Sarah was born, so it was 82
We
or
were married in
3?
87, he
85,
died in
86.
86.
Okay.
And so it was 1986, and at that time, the rules were women could not be members of the club. The husbands were the members, and if the spouse could stay, but if she remarried, she lost her membership.
Oh.
And at that time, and I don't,
They changed that with
They-
you though, didn't they?
they did,
they
with
did
her.
change-
They changed it with her to
because
give
of
her
me.
a membership.
John Culver actually changed it.
So you were grandfathered in as long as you didn't change your marital status after,
Right. I
but
could
otherwise
stay.
then it was, all bets are off.
And
Wow.
because
Wow.
I was sailing and part of the club, John Culver thought, no, we need to change the rules so that this would work. And it also happened to Ellie Selesky because her husband had died and she was going to remarry and lose her membership. So at that time it was changed in 1987, I guess.
So you were the first female member.
I was the first female.
Hmm.
Oh, cool.
She was the first female member, period.
Yes.
And have you followed suit with your kids as your parents did with you? Have they gotten involved in?
My daughter and Chris's son Rusty are 6 months apart age-wise. My daughter's a little bit older. And my dad bought an El Toro for them to use and enrolled them in the San Francisco Yacht Club Junior Sailing Program when they were 7, 8.
It was before Sarah started riding, so
Well, she started riding in 11, right?
no,
Well, at any rate,
about 8.
Rusty swallowed the hook big time, and Sarah didn't
Sarah
like
said-
it at all. She'd go sailing with us, and she'd sail the boat, but she didn't want to be out there by herself.
She'd rather be wallowing a horse.
Yeah.
She's followed your passion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She took it a whole lot further than I did, though, I'll tell you.
So we encouraged her,
Yeah.
but she didn't, she spit the hook out.
She loved going up the Delta, loved that. To this day, she hears James Taylor, she's on the Delta. It's rusty.
And you used to do that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you
Was-
used to
Spend a
she
week
says-
or two anchored out
She
up
says
there.
it's cocktail hour
Yeah.
on the Delta. Jimmy and Jabby are there. Steve and I, Rusty and Sarah.
And our two boys went through the junior sailing program over at San Francisco Yacht Club. And my oldest one joined the St. Francis, and then he went into the military, and they gave him such a bad time. They expected him to pay full duty while he was on duty. And so he just got so mad and quit, so that was his deal. And then my younger son pursued it. We used to have these little races called the Cardoza Cup, and they were laser races that we would do in honor of my late husband. And when my son graduated from USF, he went down to Cancun to
Club Med.
Yeah, Club Med, and they hired him as a sailing instructor down there. And I was so angry because I just put him through college, and he called and said he was going to be down there, and I said, look, at business suit, not bathing suit. And so he was a GO down there as a sailing instructor.
Yeah, there's quite a story that goes
Quite
with
a
that
story
one.
that goes with that one. But anyway.
Best thing that ever happened.
I know. It gave him a lot of self-confidence
Bruce says,
because he
"Damn,
went
wish
into
I could have
sales,
done that."
and it was an asset to his career. So.
Yeah, her two kids were good sailors, but neither one of them sail anymore.
We don't either. We go over the bridge and look out and go, thank God we're not out there.
Well, I think that's what happens to a few of us that.
Yeah, but you went to the
wet and
dark.
cold for
You went to the dark side, and you and Peter went to the dark side, but then you came back.
Yeah, we came back.
Yeah.
That's why the boat is called Surprise.
Perfect name.
Really, I mean,
It
that's
is.
Yeah.
truly what happened.
Yeah.
I'm sort of curious, having the experience of being a Commodore of another club, and I'm familiar with the club up at Lake Tahoe, and people are nice and it's great, but how would you compare and contrast, because every club's a little different, what was that experience like compared to your experiences down here?
Well, the focus up there is wooden boats.
And motorboats, or was.
Wooden motorboats,
Right.
the classic boats.
Right.
And initially that was, everybody had to have one. You couldn't be a member of the club, and because they were losing members, they had to expand it and change it. And
Offer
then,
a social type membership.
then you didn't have to have a boat and whatever. It's a different dynamic up there because it's seasonal. And some people stay up there all summer, so you have them as a member, and then they quit at the end of the year, because they're not there in the wintertime and they don't think it's practical. So you have a big influx of members. You'll get maybe, I think we had, about 100 that we got this last winter, or summer?
New members.
New members this summer, so I don't know.
And then they quit sort of.
And then half of them quit.
That's not exactly true, because now we're a year-round club up there. And so people are just as active all year as they are here. Just people go on vacations or don't go up as much, but
Yeah.
it's really,
Yeah.
really pretty popular.
Yeah, we've increased the activity. So every weekend there's something going on, whereas before it would be, every 3 weeks or something. And that keeps people coming in. But it still is that dynamic of people coming and going, and it's not
Sure.
like
Right.
they live here permanently. That's vacation.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, this
I
isn't
can
all,
see that.
yeah. And you have some sort of arrangement with the restaurant in the area for food there? or-
We have a restaurant down below,
Down below,
that
yeah.
that you can bring hamburgers up and whatever have you.
Right.
But there's so many good restaurants in Tahoe that most people just go out anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
So, but the restaurant downstairs is not affiliated with the club?
no.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's a standalone operation.
Yeah.
So there was we normally do not get the ark, but somebody gave the
I
ark
have
to
the
us.
ark on the
And
Do you
on
need
the-
that?
No, I have it at
Okay.
home, but so reading that, kind of the changing times of sailing, and there's not as many young
Yeah, and
people
expanding
going
their
into
stuff
it.
because they're not getting the members either and the younger ones, and it's
So-
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, here you're talking a family that has been so sailing oriented and growing up being sailing oriented. So what do you think about what's happening
I was a
today?
seat partner on an airplane with a woman who was wearing a pair of topsiders. And so I asked her, I said, "You wearing boating shoes, do you boat?" And she goes, "Oh, yes." She says, "I love to sail." I says, "How about you?" I says, "Oh, I've been sailing since I was about 7 or 8 years old." And we started talking back and forth, and I finally got to the point where I said, "I find sailing very boring. It's the competitive, you know, if I'm not out racing, I'm not out sailing." I just wasn't the kind of guy that pulled up the sails and went out for a cruise. You know, it was a boat race.
Right.
And she was flabbergasted by that. She
Mm-hmm.
couldn't understand sailing's so much fun. Well, it's more fun when you win.
And no, it's a.
Well,
it-
there's a
it's
difference
it's a
between
changing-
sailing and racing, there is
Yeah.
definite
Yeah, and
a
and
difference.
I think it's a little
true with any
changing
sport.
world that.
It's true with any sport.
There's a big running thread in Scuttlebutt. I don't know if you read Scuttlebutt, but all the clubs are talking about how are they going to get the youth to stay in sailing. They come in as junior sailors,
Right.
they get their driver's license, they get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then they're off. And so there's just threads been going for months and months about what clubs are doing to retain.
It's the
Sailing
It's
is
all
so
the
it's the
expensive.
millennial
all
Yeah,
conundrum.
and there's so many other soccer and all
Yeah,
these
there's
other
no
things that
I
kids
mean,
are playing.
you
now.
have the boat,
Right.
then you have to store it either in a slip, which costs you more money,
Right.
or you have to store it on the upper deck, which they charge you for too. And new sails, equipment or anything, and for a young
expensive.
kid, that's a
Beer and
lot.
sandwiches for the crew.
Yeah, it's a big expensive
Yeah.
for
Slap
somebody
and
young.
mayo.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
tuna
those
fish
kind of elements,
sandwiches.
besides having to pay your dues, you know, create a unfriendly.
Entry barriers.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, it's getting expensive to do anything these days. And something you might be interested in, just having grown up here, is one of our committee members chairs the Belvedere Tiburon Landmark Society, Brooke Halsey.
Brooke Halsey, yeah.
We know him.
And
Well, we knew Louise Tether and Ann Allen, I think, are the ones who started the Landmark Society. And Louise Tether, she's passed on, but she's written many books about the railroad yard, and she was the Tiburon city historian, basically.
well, their executive director's father is a member.
Yeah.
Oh, Jim
No,
Allen.
Harry Heath.
Jim Allen was the president for years and years
Oh,
and
I'm
years.
sure.
That's David Allen's son, his
Right.
oldest son.
And then
Here,
Harry Heath, his daughter is the.
executive director. She runs
Yeah.
that group.
Well, I've been thinking of joining it. One of his friends belongs there. It's just that I worked and I traveled so much that there was no
Sure.
time for me to add another element to my life. But now that I'm retired, it's something that I've considered.
Well, largely through Brooks' encouragement, we're talking with them more and more because there's a lot of overlap between they're preserving a larger picture. We're sort of a subset of that,
But a big part of it.
a big part of it, and so
We're partnering.
we're
Oh.
working more closely with them to see how we can incorporate what we do here into the larger, local community picture. And it's been fascinating. We did our last meeting. I'd never been in the room. I didn't realize they have as much as they have because you have a room there with curtains over it and
Is
some
this at the
pictures.
China Cabin or some?
No,
place else?
it's
the
right
one by
by
the Chinese restaurant in
by-
Boardwalk.
at the rustic
Oh.
rustic bakery.
That's
and
where
right
they have
there.
all their cool
In the
stuff.
back.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know they had a standalone facility other than the China
That's where they
Cabin.
keep all the cool stuff.
Yeah, and they're
They have 3.
Are they part of the Railroad Museum then too? or
Yes,
is that-
that's one of their properties.
yeah, they have basically the China Cabin, the Railroad Museum, and the
Little church.
In the little church.
yeah, the church.
St.
And
My mother was choir director up there when we were little kids. That was
She could break a glass.
Were you
Catholic
a
church.
choir boy?
Pardon?
Were you a choir
That's my
boy?
first
In
husband.
any
No, I
way.
was not an altar boy either.
Never in any way, shape or
Quiet
form.
hairs.
I wouldn't see him like that.
No.
No, I would rather, I had to go to 10:30 Mass because that's when the choir was there and Mom was directing.
Yeah.
And then after 10:30 Mass, I was home in my boat on the lagoon sailing. I used to do things like take my El Toro, and I got a fitted bed sheet and a broomstick, and I rowed all the way up to the windward side of Belvedere Island, or Belvedere Lagoon, turned the boat around, pulled this yard arm broomstick and a fitted sheet with two, and I spinnaker sailed all of my El Toro all the way down the lagoon, just
You created a
so I could do it. And then,
No, go ahead. No.
and then my dad was very active in what they call the sunboat fleet. The sunboat is a 15-foot starboat. They look very familiar, very similar, except it's a centerboard boat, 15 feet. And I used to take my sailfish sail and rig it up as a Genoa jib on that, sail out around the lagoon.
But you could turn those boats, they could flip over, but you could flip them back. And we learned how you didn't have to go in the water when you flipped them. And we used to, on Easter morning, we'd go out and in our little dresses, all before church, and we'd go out and sail and turn the boats over in our Easter outfits. And Mother was just fit to be tied.
I wonder why.
I know. Well, we never got wet. We knew what we were
Yeah,
doing.
when the boat goes over, you climb over the
You
weather
also
rail,
broke
stand on
one
the
of her
centerboard,
trees
hop
and
back in the boat, and off
Scotch
you go.
taped it together.
With your familiarity with the lagoon, maybe some people aren't aware of the little sailing club that's right there on the lagoon.
Well, my-
Belvedere Sailing
Belvedere
Society.
Sailing Society. My dad bought the house that was 26 Cove Road. He bought the property as a 60 by 100 foot lot, built the house. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And he used to talk to Teddy Goldbeck, ask him who taught him how to sail. It was my dad, who used to invite Hap McGill, Teddy Goldbeck, all the kids.
Eason, Hank Eason.
They'd all come down to our house on the weekends and sail El Toros off of our dock. And there was a big independent journal article done about it, and all the photographs were taken at our house and on our dock. And I gave it to, I photocopied it and gave the photocopy to Glenn Isaacson.
Sure.
I had to get, my dad invented or designed this 18-foot lake scow. And we had it on the lagoon, and when we sold Mom's house after she passed, I had to get it out of there. So I had to deal with Glenn
Guess
because
where
he
it
was
is?
the Belvedere Sailing Society Commodore or what have you. And so, but it talks about all that, and my dad was instrumental in getting all the kids involved in sailing. He was not the founder of the club, but he was certainly involved in it, of the Belvedere Sailing Society.
Of it
But he
emerging,
was certainly
yeah.
involved in it,
Yeah.
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 He was an engineer, knew a lot about pumps, and so he also was involved in installing the flood pumps on the lagoon down at Centerville Avenue. When the lagoon got too high, they'd pump it into Richardson's Bay.
Well, as a kid, I remember I grew up in the East Bay, and my father had a boss who lived on the lagoon. And if he didn't want to go across both bridges, we would go and catch the
Richmond Ferry?
Richmond Ferry.
Oh, yeah.
That came in at the Rod and Gun Club.
Mhm.
And I remember I was fascinated watching the trains come and get on the barge.
Here?
down here. Yeah.
Yeah, there were why Elephant Rock is Elephant Rock? Because kids used to go out there and fish on the pier. The pier was wedge shaped, so the barges came in and they would seat when they were all the way in. Well, kids were out there fishing one day when the barge came in, knocked the kid off, squished him between the barge and
I went to school with his sister.
yeah. So
I remember that
once
in
that
grammar
happened, there
school.
was no more kids
Remember
allowed on the
Remember
wharf.
that in grammar
or-
school.
And that's why Elephant Rock was put together so that the kids would go there and
Have
fish.
an area to fish.
Why was it called Elephant Rock? So why is it?
It's
called Elephant?
I don't know whether it looked like an elephant or something. It's been Elephant Rock ever since I've known it. A funny story, I was sailing, coming back from a race, I think in the East Bay. And there was a woman on Elephant Rock. She had apparently cast her line out and caught a seagull. Her bait was going through the air and the seagull grabbed it. And she's got seagull at the end of her fishing pole screaming, squawking, bird flopping around.
I was
That
with
was-
the wrong
That was
going.
hilarious.
Well,
Speaking of, you were talking about rigging your boat with a bed sheet and so forth. Remember when we had the dinghy derby?
Oh, the dinghy derby,
Oh,
yeah, the umbrella
yeah,
spinnakers.
yeah.
Spinners.
Yeah.
And,
And Dad,
Those were
I went
fun
out to Dad, and Dad's boat sank.
He tipped over,
That's
yeah.
right.
He had Hank Eason build him a boat had a question mark on the sail. You probably remember this. It was like an old rowing skiff that he had converted to a sailboat. And weren't you with him?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
yeah.
They went out for the commoner's
And
dinghy and
sank.
tipped it over out in the middle of the straits, and somebody had to go out and save them.
One thing you never talked about was the annual meeting here called Cooks and Waiters.
Yeah.
No, we've had numerous people talk about there. Talk about it. It's
Legendary,
when you listen
isn't it?
to them. It's the height of their experience.
Tell us more.
But
Your
So
experience.
I didn't know these guys at the time, but I was invited by Marin Matosic to come to one of the Cooks and Waiters entertainment days. And the guy they had hired was Phil Harris, the band leader.
Right, sure.
You know,
Bing
very famous
Crosby's
guy.
best friend.
And he was pretty old at the time. And I was sitting up in the audience, and he kind of shuffled in. He always had his cocktail with him. And he said, I want to tell you a story about Marin Matosic. And he said, when I signed up to do this, I didn't know too much about it. But I knew that Marin had an office down in San Mateo. He was a public
Accountant.
accountant. And so he says, I went over to his office, and his secretary was there, and I said, I'm here to see Marin Matosic. He says, oh, he was waiting for you, but he's going across the street for lunch and wants you to join him. So Phil says, I shuffled across the street, and I went in and I said, man, it was really dark. And I looked all over and I couldn't see him, so I worked my way up to the bar and I said, I'm here to meet Mayor Matosic. You know where I can find him? And he says, you're standing on him.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
there's a story about Marin when he owned the Teal, bird boat number 24, anchored out here. And he was up the mast painting or repairing, and somebody in a motorboat just was going circles and circles, and he was
Oh, that's
not
mean.
being nice to Marin.
That's mean.
Maybe he deserved
He
it.
deserved it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know,
A lot of
Mary
people
did.
had that
Rough
opinion.
character.
Yes.
We were going up I went up the mast of Man-Face.
Oh.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I do. How I did that, I will never
I'd
know.
never go
I
up
wouldn't
in
even
mast.
consider that today.
No.
Young
Remember
and
how we
stupid.
looking at man face? Remember how when we went out sailing, racing on it, that we named it woman face?
We did.
That's right.
Yeah, we
And
did.
we
That's
were sitting
right.
here
Put a-
looking and saying,
put a
"Oh, this is the
WO in
man
front of that?"
face and this- we put the woman
The
face.
WO in
Woman
front.
face.
Huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually thought about buying that, and we went out and sailed it. Now, bird boat, you trim it properly, it'll just sail wherever,
Yeah, you could
it
let
just
go of the
it
helm, walk
goes.
around the deck.
You can do whatever you
keeps
want.
going.
Well, we had rather bit of an argument out there because that boat didn't do that.
Yeah, I was hauling the sail up or something. I asked her to pull in the main sheet, and she let go of the tiller, and the boat just
Yeah.
started going by
You
the
could do
surface.
that on the bird boat.
You also get wet on the bird boat.
Oh, gee.
It's a traditional over one wave, under the next two.
But we were
Nothing like-
young, we were
We were young, yeah.
so-
There's
Yeah.
stories about the
Oh,
light
yeah.
ship race in,
Yeah.
I think,
Oh, yeah.
'69. Lee Caldwell, Lee Harvey Cobwell, as the kids used to call him, broke his mast.
And the Teal-
Skip Matosage in the Teal was pumping the bilges through the head. That's how much
Ooh.
water was in the
Oh
boat.
my.
Whoa.
Yeah,
And
it was-
we lost our
You lost a
backstay.
running backstay.
And the mast was just, and we had
Oh.
a funny,
There was a winch, there was
Oh.
a wire winch below decks for the main
yeah,
halyard.
that you had to take
to-
off and add to another thing. And when the backstay went, the mast went forward, and it put such tension on that you couldn't get that thing off. And we had to get the main down. We had the main halfway down, and
so
it was we were
big.
just, and the waves were. Oh, I was so scared. And Dad, he was
Whistling, right?
whistling, and that meant
See
that
where
he
that
was
comes
very,
from?
Yes, I do.
very scared
Yes.
too. And so
Always know,
my
if he
late
starts
husband
whistling, you're in
finally
trouble.
had to climb up the mast with things going this way, and he took a knife and cut the halyard. So, but that
That was a more memorable.
I was so terrified. When I
Traumatized.
got home, I was in shock. I really was in
Yeah,
shock.
there was actually a boat that went up on, I think, Rodeo Beach, because the waves were so
Whoa.
big that when you were at the crest of the wave, you could see land, but when you were in the valley, you couldn't see.
Couldn't see.
And
Wow.
it was so rough
Wow.
that they ended up beaching the boat and
I would have gotten off and run.
Yeah,
No, I
that-
didn't.
Inland.
That was closing day for me too, on going out
I
there.
would, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
So we've taken a lot of your time, and this has really been a lot of fun to hear about. And it looks like you need a refresher anyway.
We have to drive the gauntlet
Yeah.
to get out of here, you know.
What would you say is your most memorable experience or feeling about this club? Anything stand out?
Just being a part of it all these years. There's a lot of tradition here. A lot of nice people here. Some not so nice, but you know, it's the way it is.
We had a lot of fun
This
here.
this is when I was a kid. Before the harbor was in, Dad, one of his 210s was on a trailer in what's now the parking lot. And I remember, you know, kids sneaking around and
Right.
getting underneath the tarp and hanging out in there. And old Ed, the shoreboat drivers, come down and try to chase us out until we told them, "This is my daddy's boat. You know, leave me alone." Oh, okay. I get anything I want.
My experience is the same too. It just is so much a part of my dad's life, and I was very close to my dad.
Right.
And he was always down here working on his boats. And even when I hear seagulls sometimes, I think of sitting with Dad on this boat when he was working. It's just, you know, that memory
Right.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
then all the things that we did racing out here with my late husband, with my husband, current husband, and
Yeah, we were here.
we
back in
lived
the-
here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was- we were here every weekend,
All the
Yeah.
time.
all the
Yeah.
time.
yeah.
But
I'd
it-
come down
this was a
and
big
work
part of
on
life.
the 210 on the dock. Remember that? I scraped the deck. And,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
In her
Yeah.
bathing suit
In
with
my
all
bathing
those
suit.
horny old men up on the railing looking down.
Well, you know, if you're gonna be in the sun, you might as well get your tan going. You know.
Exactly.
2 for 1.
Exactly.
It's just a
I still
wonderful
do it in
club,
the
and I
garden.
just have wonderful memories
And,
of
and,
it.
and this was your
It's like a
playground.
second home.
Oh
It's
yeah.
a second home.
Yeah.
Right, it really
You
is.
know, and you never.
Yeah.
It was interesting because coming in, you know, my 20s or teens and 20s, there was never an age difference between people in my mind. You know, because it didn't matter how old you were. We were just all
Having
part
fun.
of the same thing and having a
And
good
the
time.
common interest.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
the
having a
common
really
interest.
good time.
And everybody's so friendly all
And
the time.
it's
Right.
very supportive and yes,
Three things come to mind to me. Number one, Donna and I got married here,
yes.
which was really a splendid event. And the other one was I played Santa Claus one year.
Oh, that's right. When Rusty and
that
Sarah were
was
little.
so much fun.
Oh.
I can remember one thing, it was kind of afterwards, and we're hanging around, I'm still in Santa Claus outfit, and some kid had something he was looking at, and I said, "So what's that?" And he looks at me and says, "Don't you know?"
Santa Claus is supposed to know everything.
Chris and Bill got married on their boat running down Raccoon
Yeah.
Straits with the
Yep.
spinnaker up.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
we a bunch of us packed the spinnaker. We packed a bunch of filled balloons in the bag. So when the spinnaker came out and popped, all these balloons came flying out. And the Reverend was.
Oh, that
was
poor
not
man,
happy.
he was
had his arm
hanging
wrapped around
on
the
for
mast.
dear life.
He was locked on.
He
was
was
not.
not happy.
So the third thing was, when all three of us are racing Islander 36s, whomever won had to host the other boats. So
dinner.
they were both Corinthian, I was San Francisco.
Oh.
So when they'd win, I'd have to buy, and when I'd win, they'd have to buy. So then we'd sail in here with our crew, and then party, and then go back to the other club.
Well, Friday nights were like that too.
Oh, that was so
You
much
say a
fun.
lot of San
So
Francisco
much
people would be here on Friday nights afterwards.
Well, they started serving food
Well, yeah.
and free beer and what
Yeah.
have you.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's changes. I mean, there's
But
changes.
they're positive
but
changes.
Well,
I think so, yeah.
I'm hoping that whatever we do for the club, back to the whole idea of working with the Landmark Society, that when we're finished, and as you can see, these guys are moving like at a feverish pace, and hopefully, I think the goal is what, end of March?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I specifically asked John if they
You're
were
gonna
on schedule.
blink and
he
that's
said, yes,
gonna
they
be
are.
here.
Right, right.
And it's still
you,
all
and you won't
ripped
have to
up.
walk through the dining room to
Get to the
Or
restrooms.
get
Yeah.
to the restroom or any of that.
Just trying to find the office
But I-
manager, we saw the whole damn thing.
But I'd like to see us.
Dead end.
There's ladders.
I'd like to
Dead
see us
end.
do an open house for the community,
Yeah.
just,
Oh, that'd be lovely to do.
Yeah, that would be
It's going to be
wonderful.
breathtaking.
What does the insurance company say about that?
well,
I know opening day is an
Yeah,
issue,
and
you have to
also
be
You
an
get a
invite.
one-day
liquor
permit.
license as well.
Yeah, you get a one-day permit.
That's more of a,
We do that all the time. Up
Steve,
at
do you
home.
know, do you know the premiums we pay?
I bet it's a lot.
Nah.
Nothing's an issue.
No.
John
The guy
Sutak,
wears like
Is
a
Sutex-
$40,000 pinky ring.
is that Sutak still? Is he still the agent?
I've
John Sutek?
I've erased his name from my mind.
Oh. Well, he was a member here for many, many years, and
Yeah.
then his
I've
problem
always
was he
thought
was
about
racing
that.
Etchells. And
Don't we have his mask?
all the Etchells were over there. It's at Brand XYC. And he'd come home and put his boat away and go to the bar, and he'd miss all the what Rusty Canada calls the karate sailing. And I said, what's karate sailing? He says, well, I was beating along like this, and he tacked over here, and then I tacked over here, and he tacked over here.
It's like when they first started doing the little remote
Sutek
control boats.
joined
Yeah,
over there
Odin,
so he
Odin.
could get into the after race
oh, wow.
after race recaps.
Wow.
I'm not,
Yeah.
isn't he still a member here? I thought.
He could be. He could be.
Rusty?
He had
No,
Sarah's not
Sutek.
anymore though.
he had
Sutek.
a bunch of
I was
Etchells
always
masks up
wondering
in
what
the
happened to
pneumonia
Ian
alley.
Nancy.
I think he's.
And their daughter.
I was looking for a flagpole for
Whitney,
our house,
Whitney.
and I called him up. I said, "Hey, John, you got some old Etchells masks in Pneumonia Alley up in the rafters there." He says, "Can I buy one from you?" And he goes,
It's our
"Says
flagpole.
you can have it." I said, "Okay." So that's a home. We
Flagpole.
have an Etchells mask for a flagpole
It's
at
our
our house.
flagpole.
That's very
Right
practical.
now it has
38
Christmas tree
38
lights.
feet
It
tall.
looks like a Christmas tree.
Wow.
It's recycling.
Oh,
Yes.
It is.
Repurposing.
Repurposing, yeah.
Right, right. Well, I know Yuta and I want to thank you. This has really been a treat.
We're not.
This
We're
was
only
fun.
halfway done, aren't we? we got another half hour stories to do.
I got 3 hours more of battery, and I
don't know how
got
much
10
more.
hours
I don't
more
know how much more
of
we can talk
data.
about.
As you think of more things, we can do this. And by the way, if you go to the website, you can see all of the conversations that
So,
we've had.
what's the link, the path to get there?
Here's what's going to happen is usually on Monday mornings I upload this to our YouTube site, and then I send an email to everyone who was here
Oh,
with
good.
a link. So you
Oh,
don't
good.
so you don't have to think about it, and you just click on the link.
Oh, so this
Oh,
isn't on the
perfect.
CYC website?
It
It's
is.
on it,
You can get to it through the
Through the
CYC
CYC,
website.
yeah.
but it takes you to YouTube, basically.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, fun.
This
Yeah.
is a dedicated YouTube
Channel.
that
Yeah,
Mike
and
established.
we don't have time to edit. It's just there's like 15
What
of
you
them out
see
there.
is what you get. We were talking
And-
about editing,
All
but
the
that
bad
would have.
jokes and everything?
Wait, the strange
Yeah, it-
About the
conversation.
minister, the rabbi,
Steve,
and the priest.
Steve,
Well, I
See,
didn't
that's
do a
what makes
bar.
it
You
real.
want to give a gut shot? It's free. Just put it
That's
on
what
there.
makes it real.
No, that's what makes it real, and
Yeah.
it's really super cool. And yeah, we'll
And
we'll
fortunately,
polish it all up later.
fortunately, we got some people before they passed. We got George, and
A participant?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So, we didn't get Bill Cadell, unfortunately, in time. But yeah, we're really, and
So
we've
you-
learned a lot.
You guys have a copy of the 100-year book that
We do.
Dick
And
Slotto and put together?
this is
And
another.
in digital format too. I
We're,
found it.
we're going to reprint it.
Yeah,
We
we're
have
in
it,
there.
and
Sailing
that's another
exploits.
thing. And then we're also collecting artifacts, and we've been given some space upstairs. And once all of this other stuff is done, then we'll have an area where with video and then we're going through our.
Should I turn the camera off?
Yeah, you can turn it. You're going through our archives to see